I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
The announcement was already written. The press statement had been approved. A gold-edged folder rested before Prince William, carrying a decision that would place Queen Camilla at the heart of one of the monarchy's most sensitive institutions. But before the future king could authorize its release, Princess Anne moved across the room, placed her hand over the document, and delivered a warning no one present had expected. There would be no appointment without a full family vote. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William froze. He had prepared to name Camilla royal patron of the Crown Heritage Trust, a ceremonial role in the body protecting royal residences, private archives, historic objects, and charitable legacies belonging to the crown. The appointment was meant to present unity beside Charles that very evening. Instead, Anne had exposed a dangerous truth. The family had been summoned to witness a decision, not help make it. Anne felt the insult immediately. She had entered the private family council at Windsor Castle, expecting debate, a closed meeting where senior royals discussed decisions affecting the institution. Yet the statement was complete, the release time was fixed, and the silver pen beside William suggested only one step remained. He did not see her intervention as caution. He saw his aunt closing the folder beneath his hand as a direct challenge to his future authority. Camilla did not move. She sat at the far end of the table with her expression controlled, but her fingers tightened around the pen as Anne spoke again. The Princess Royal declared that no one could be placed over the family's shared heritage without the approval of every senior working royal, meaning those who officially represent the crown through public duties. Accepting the role without that vote, she warned, would not create unity. It would bury resentment beneath ceremony until trust inside the monarchy finally cracked. William pulled his hand back, stunned by the force of her words. Anne slid the announcement away, turned it face down and said, "You may lead this family one day, but you do not own its memory." Silence swallowed the room. Camilla looked toward him, waiting to see whether he would retreat, while Anne remained standing, prepared for the consequence. He did not cancel the appointment. William ordered the doors closed and asked his aunt to name every person she believed he had ignored. What began as an interruption now became something far more dangerous, a struggle over authority, loyalty, and whether William's first instinct as a future king had already divided the people closest to him. To the outside world, the disagreement concerned a royal patronage. Inside the family, it touched wounds that had never fully healed. For William, the appointment represented stability. For Anne, it threatened the principles her mother had guarded for decades. For Camilla, it promised recognition after years of scrutiny. Each entered the dispute carrying a different version of duty, and each believed surrender would expose something painfully personal. William carried more than one decision on his shoulders. As Charles reduced parts of his workload, his son had taken a larger role in planning the monarchy's future, balancing family loyalty with the demands of an institution that could not afford confusion. The patronage, a formal royal position supporting an organization, seemed practical to him. Naming Camilla would recognize her place beside the king, while showing that the family stood together. Yet now, after Anne's intervention, that gesture of stability threatened to become proof that his future leadership could ignore resistance. Anne saw something entirely different. The Crown Heritage Trust, the organization responsible for protecting royal properties, private collections, and inherited traditions, had never been an ordinary charity in her eyes. Queen Elizabeth II had treated it as a family responsibility, one that required consultation whenever authority changed hands. Her daughter remembered those rules because they were tied to trust. To Anne, allowing one person to gain influence without a full discussion did not honor her mother's legacy. It weakened the very safeguards the late queen had preserved. Camilla felt the wound in silence. When the council paused, she turned to a trusted aide and asked whether Anne objected to the process or to her personally. The question revealed what ceremony could not hide. The queen consort had spent years earning public acceptance, yet this resistance reminded her that a title could be granted while belonging remained uncertain. She feared the family accepted her position beside Charles, but would never accept her as a guardian of its memory. William stood alone beside a Windsor window, rereading the announcement until the paper shook slightly in his hands. Catherine entered quietly and noticed the frustration he could no longer conceal. She told him leadership was not weakened by hearing a warning before it became a disaster. Her words forced him to consider the possibility he had refused to face. Anne might not be trying to defeat him. She might be trying to protect him. Then the deeper betrayal emerged. Anne produced written concerns from Edward and Sophie, while Catherine admitted she had already questioned whether the role carried powers never explained to the wider family. William soon learned Charles had known those objections existed but still encouraged him to move forward, believing confidence would stop hesitation from becoming organized opposition. The prince's anger began shifting. Anne had blocked the appointment, but his father had placed him in the line of fire, and her resistance had not begun that day. It had been building since one private ceremony months earlier, when a seemingly minor exchange convinced her that the family's shared heritage was being quietly redirected. Months before the blocked announcement, the royal family gathered inside St. George's Hall for what was meant to be a modest heritage ceremony. No cameras were invited, no public statement followed. Yet during that private event, Anne witnessed a conversation that changed everything. A ceremonial key was placed in Camilla's hand, an archivist was dismissed with a glance, and William was told that future access decisions would no longer require the wider family's approval. Anne entered the ceremony already carrying the weight of memory. The Queen Elizabeth Memorial Archive, a protected collection of family letters, ceremonial records, and personal objects connected to the late monarch, was being reopened under the Crown Heritage Trust. William attended on behalf of Charles, while his aunt was present, because many of the items had belonged to their mother and to generations before her. That history made every decision personal. Nothing in those rooms was merely paper or property. Camilla approached the issue calmly, but her request immediately changed the atmosphere. She asked whether several boxes of private correspondence could be moved from restricted family custody into the Trust's central catalog, the main system used to record and manage historic material. Anne objected at once. To her, those letters were not institutional assets waiting to be reorganized. They were private fragments of lives, grief, duty, and family conflict. The Queen Consort heard the resistance, yet she continued pressing for a clearer system of control. William stepped between them with measured words. He told Anne the change was administrative and insisted that no one was taking ownership of the family's past. But the prince continued the ceremony before the archivist could explain what the transfer would actually mean. That decision wounded his aunt more than he understood. She did not feel reassured. She felt dismissed. Then the moment arrived that she would never forget. A senior official presented Camilla with a symbolic archive key and announced that future approvals would be routed through the Queen's office, the private team managing her official work and decisions. The monarch's wife accepted the key. William said nothing. Anne watched both of them and understood that a ceremonial gesture had quietly become a transfer of influence. The truth came later that evening. The archivist approached Anne in private and handed her a written memorandum, a formal document explaining the proposed powers behind the future patronage. It showed that the holder could influence access, exhibition priorities, and the movement of sensitive family items. The warning was not gossip. It was recorded in black and white. Anne found William alone in the corridor and asked whether he understood what had just been handed away. He replied that it was only a symbolic key. She looked toward the closed archive doors and answered, "Symbols are how power enters a room unnoticed." From that moment, her decision was made. If he ever tried to formalize that authority without consultation, she would stop him directly. So when the appointment finally reached the Windsor Council table, Anne was no longer raising a concern, she was keeping a promise she had made to herself. Once the council doors were locked, royal politeness began to disappear. William demanded evidence. Anne produced it. Camilla asked whether she was being accused of seeking control over the family's private history. Then Charles entered unexpectedly, saw the announcement lying face down, and understood instantly that the decision he hoped would pass quietly had become a direct confrontation between his son, his sister, and his wife. Anne placed the archivist's memorandum on the table and pushed it toward William. The document, a formal written record explaining the powers attached to the proposed patronage, listed influence over archive access, preservation priorities, private exhibitions, and the movement of selected objects between royal residences. These were not minor ceremonial duties. They could shape which parts of the family's history remained protected, which stories reached the public, and who was allowed to make those choices. William refused to yield. He argued that trustees, the officials legally responsible for supervising the organization, would still control every major decision. Camilla's role, he insisted, would remain ceremonial. Anne answered without raising her voice. Ceremony still created influence. A title could decide whose opinion carried weight, whose request received attention, and whose objections disappeared behind closed doors. Camilla turned directly toward Anne. She asked whether the Princess Royal truly believed she could not be trusted. The question hung between them. Anne paused. That silence cut deeper than an immediate reply, because the Queen Consort understood that the answer was not simple. Her years beside Charles had earned rank and recognition, but Anne was still unwilling to hand her unquestioned control over the family's private memory. William's anger finally broke through. He accused his aunt of humiliating Camilla and undermining his authority before the family. Anne struck back at once. She told him the humiliation had begun when he prepared a public announcement before seeking consent. He had not invited the family to decide. He had invited them to approve what had already been decided. Charles could remain silent no longer. The king admitted that he had encouraged William to move quickly because he feared a vote would become a judgment on Camilla's entire royal life, rather than on one appointment. He had believed confidence would prevent old resentment from gathering strength. Instead, his strategy had placed his wife under harsher scrutiny and his son in an impossible position. Anne then delivered the most damaging truth. Catherine, Edward, and Sophie had never received the complete memorandum. They had been shown the title, but not the authority hidden beneath it. William stared at the document and realized the family had been expected to approve a role without understanding its reach. Charles moved to take the memorandum, but William placed his palm over it. Camilla rose from her chair. Anne remained standing between them. "Do not touch it," the prince said, looking at his father, "until you tell me whether you knowingly asked me to defend an incomplete proposal." The fracture was now visible. The dispute was no longer Anne against William. The deeper question was, who had designed the appointment, who had concealed its reach, and who truly expected to control the decision. The patronage had not begun as William's idea. It had emerged through private briefings, revised documents, and carefully worded recommendations that made the appointment appear both natural and urgent. As the family examined the paperwork, one unsettling truth became clear. No single person had ordered the decision. Instead, several trusted figures had pushed it forward piece by piece, leaving William to carry the authority and the blame. William studied the first proposal beside the version held by Charles, and felt the betrayal settle slowly. The king's private office, the team responsible for managing his official decisions and correspondence, had drafted the appointment after concerns that the Crown Heritage Trust lacked a senior royal capable of coordinating work across several residences. His own briefing described Camilla's role as symbolic. The fuller document used a different phrase, strategic guidance. Those two words changed everything. Charles watched his son compare the pages. The monarch knew what William was seeing and why it mattered. He had been told that placing Camilla at the head of the trust would reassure donors, stabilize leadership, and honor her growing work in preservation and literature. Yet the king had also received language giving her more influence than his heir had been shown. William no longer felt merely uninformed. He felt used. Catherine moved through the paperwork with quiet focus and found another sign of how far the plan had advanced. A release time had already been reserved with the communications office, the palace team that prepares public announcements and manages media statements. That meant the appointment was expected to reach the public before the family could organize a formal objection. She showed the schedule to William, and his expression hardened. Sophie then identified the clause everyone else had missed. It allowed the patron to recommend changes to restricted access protocols, the rules controlling who could view private archives and sensitive family material. The trusted confidant explained that the power was not absolute, but it was still real. Camilla would not own the records, yet her recommendations could influence who saw them, where they were displayed, and how they were interpreted. Charles waited until the others left before speaking honestly. He told William he wanted Camilla to receive one responsibility that could never be dismissed as decorative. The king admitted the motive in a private conversation, not through a public statement or anonymous briefing. His voice carried pain, but the prince remained wounded. Love for his wife did not justify placing his son behind an incomplete proposal. William picked up the signed communications schedule. He tore it once through the center and placed both halves before Charles. "The announcement is dead," he said, "unless this family chooses to revive it openly." The decision shocked both sides. Every senior royal would now be summoned for a recorded vote, a formally documented decision in which each position would be preserved. The suspension saved William from forcing through a flawed appointment, but it exposed Camilla to the judgment she had feared for years, a room where every senior member of the family would have to declare whether they truly trusted her. By sunset, the announcement had vanished from the palace schedule. Staff were told only that the patronage required further consultation, but Camilla understood the truth. Her future would now be discussed person by person, vote by vote, inside a family whose memories stretched far beyond official titles. For the first time since becoming queen, she faced a formal test that no ceremony, speech, or crown could soften. William scheduled the full family vote for the following day. Charles, Anne, Catherine, Edward, Sophie, and the other senior working royals would all be asked to take part. Senior working royals are the family members who officially represent the crown through public duties. Senior working royals are the family members who officially represent the crown through public duties, and their judgment would carry real weight. They would choose between three outcomes: approve the original powers, accept a reduced ceremonial role, or reject the appointment completely. Camilla returned to her private rooms and removed the brooch selected for the announcement. The queen consort handed it to her dresser and asked that it be put away. She no longer wished to wear something chosen for a celebration that might never happen. The gesture was small, but the pain behind it was not. After years of public scrutiny, she had reached the highest royal position beside the king, yet one family vote could expose how uncertain her acceptance still remained. Charles tried to reassure her. He promised to defend the appointment and reminded her that he had never doubted her ability to carry the role. Camilla stopped him before he could say more. She told the monarch that forced loyalty would be worse than defeat, because every future appearance would remind her that the title had been imposed rather than freely given. When he reached for her hand, she quietly asked him not to speak for her at the vote. William faced a different kind of fear. The prince privately considered supporting a reduced position, but neither outcome felt safe. Rejecting Camilla could wound his father and deepen the fracture between them. Approving her, even with restrictions, might convince Anne that the consultation had changed nothing. He had suspended the announcement to protect the family, yet the vote now threatened to expose every hidden loyalty within it. Then Camilla received unexpected news through a written briefing from the council secretary. Anne was not demanding her complete exclusion. The Princess Royal had proposed a revised patronage with no authority over private archives, family correspondence, or inherited personal collections. The Queen read the document twice. For the first time, she saw that Anne's resistance might not be a personal rejection. It might be an attempt to draw a boundary. Camilla sat beside the unused announcement folder, traced one finger across her printed title, and closed it slowly. Then she made a decision that surprised Charles and unsettled William. Before the vote, she requested a private conversation with Anne. No king, no future king, no aides, no advisors. The outcome would not be decided first at the council table, but in a smaller room where two women carrying decades of unresolved history finally faced each other alone. There were no secretaries in the room, no folders, no prepared statements. Anne stood beside the fireplace while Camilla closed the door herself. For years, both women had performed duty in public, while avoiding the deepest question between them: whether acceptance could ever become trust. Now, with the vote only hours away, Camilla asked Anne to tell her plainly whether the objection concerned royal procedure or whether she would never be considered part of the family. Camilla spoke first. She admitted that the patronage had moved too quickly and that she had never asked to see the full objections before the announcement was prepared. The role had seemed ceremonial, but the documents proved otherwise. Anne listened without interrupting. Her resistance, she explained, was rooted in stewardship, the duty to protect something valuable for those who came before and those who would follow. No spouse, sibling, heir, or monarch should control shared family history without firm safeguards. Camilla lowered her voice and admitted why the appointment had mattered so deeply. She had accepted it because it offered something she had never fully possessed, a responsibility tied to the family's past, not simply to her place beside Charles. The queen consort had endured years of judgment, yet this role appeared to promise belonging through service. Anne heard the pain beneath those words, but she did not soften the truth. Anne then made her own confession. Watching the archive key placed in Camilla's hand had reopened grief she believed she had mastered. The Princess Royal had felt as though another part of her mother's private world was being removed without consent. Her reaction had not come from one title alone. It had come from the fear that Elizabeth's memory could slowly become property managed by offices rather than protected by family. Camilla answered with the decision Anne had not expected. She would refuse the original appointment voluntarily. The monarch would not defend powers she no longer believed she should hold. However, she asked Anne to support a revised patronage limited to fundraising, public preservation projects, and ceremonial advocacy, a public role without control over private family material. Anne considered the request carefully. She agreed, but only if the revised charter, the written document defining the role's powers and limits, permanently protected correspondence, personal collections, and family access from unilateral control by any future patron. Camilla accepted. She took the amended proposal, wrote her approval beneath the restrictions, and handed it back. Before opening the door, Camilla extended her hand. Anne did not take it immediately. Then she did. "Accepting limits," she said, "may earn more trust than accepting power ever could." The two women entered the council separately, but William noticed the document in his aunt's hand and the Queen's signature beneath the new terms. The private conversation had changed the vote. Yet outside the palace walls, news of the blocked appointment had already escaped, and the monarchy was about to watch its family dispute become a national judgment. By morning, the private disagreement was splashed across Britain. One newspaper carried a stark front page showing Anne beside the words, "Not without our vote." Broadcasters framed the dispute as a challenge to William's authority, while crowds gathered outside Windsor Castle, hoping to glimpse the family arriving. A decision intended to preserve trust was now being interpreted as rebellion, rejection, and the first major test of how the future king would handle opposition inside his own house. William heard the criticism before he reached the council. A television broadcaster described him as an heir who had mistaken preparation for permission, and the phrase struck harder than he expected. The prince knew why. Catherine had warned him privately that leadership was not weakened by listening before disaster arrived. Now the same judgment was being repeated across the country, no longer as advice from his wife, but as a public verdict on his readiness to lead. The palace tried to contain the storm. Its communications office, the team responsible for official statements and media responses, confirmed only that the proposed patronage was undergoing family consultation. The careful wording satisfied no one. Commentators quickly divided into three camps: those praising Anne for defending accountability, those accusing her of humiliating Camilla, and those questioning why William had prepared the appointment before securing a vote. Camilla saw the front page while entering her car, and briefly lowered her eyes. The Queen Consort understood that the public was judging far more than a royal title. Every headline reopened the older question of whether she had ever earned a secure place within the monarchy. Yet the story shifted when a revised palace briefing, a written update released to explain the changing decision, confirmed that she had personally requested the patronage's powers be reduced. Anne arrived at Windsor to scattered applause. The Princess Royal did not acknowledge it, but the reaction showed that many people viewed her intervention as a defense of family accountability, rather than rebellion. Camilla followed moments later. Some voices cheered her. Others fell silent. That divided response captured the entire conflict. Respect without complete trust. Acceptance shadowed by memory. A correspondent stood before Windsor's Henry the Gate, holding the newspaper with Anne's image, while the bells began ringing behind her. At that exact moment, William's car passed through without slowing. The image became the symbol of the day, the future king entering a family vote beneath a headline questioning his judgment. Inside the gates, every arrival carried new pressure. Each senior royal knew the vote would decide more than Camilla's appointment. It would define whether disagreement under William's emerging leadership would be punished, ignored, or heard. The public had delivered its noise, but the final verdict still belonged to the family, and William now had to decide whether authority meant defending his original decision or having the courage to correct it. The final meeting lasted less than an hour, but its meaning reached far beyond one patronage. Around the Windsor table sat a king protecting his wife, an heir confronting his own mistake, a sister defending the family's inheritance, and a queen asking to be judged by what she was prepared to surrender. When the votes were recorded, the original appointment failed, but something more important than victory or defeat took its place. William spoke before anyone marked a ballot. The prince admitted that urgency, loyalty, and incomplete advice had replaced consultation. He had treated preparation as permission and Anne's resistance as disobedience, rather than responsibility. The family then rejected the original patronage unanimously because it carried influence over restricted archives, private correspondence, and personal collections. Those terms mattered because they touched the most sensitive parts of royal history, including records never intended for public control. Anne accepted the apology without pretending the damage had been small. The Princess Royal acknowledged that stopping the announcement before the council had humiliated William, especially at a moment when he was trying to prove his readiness to lead. Yet she explained that silence would have created something worse, a precedent allowing future authority to grow without family consent. He listened, and for the first time, he did not defend himself. Camilla then made the vote personal. The Queen supported every restriction placed upon her own position, proving that she valued a role trusted by the family more than power secured through Charles. A second ballot approved her as royal patron of public heritage and preservation, a ceremonial position focused on conservation fundraising, restoration programs, literacy archives, and projects giving the public access to royal history without exposing private family material. Charles accepted the result without interference. After the meeting, the king told William that protecting the monarch did not always mean protecting the monarch's wishes. His son understood the lesson immediately. Love had driven his father to support Camilla, but love alone could not create trust, and royal authority could not survive if it demanded obedience without explanation. William lifted the original announcement and placed it into the council fireplace. Anne watched the pages curl. Camilla closed the revised charter, the written document defining her new role and its limits. Charles remained beside his son, as the proposal that nearly divided them disappeared. The revised appointment was announced that afternoon with full family approval. At the first preservation event, Anne stood beside Camilla, while William introduced them both and emphasized shared stewardship. The moment carried a final verdict. His aunt had not blocked him to weaken his future reign. She had stopped a flawed decision from becoming its foundation. The monarchy survived because the family chose limits over pride, consultation over speed, and accountability over appearance. Camilla received less authority, but gained something more valuable: genuine acceptance. William emerged not diminished, but tested. Charles learned that devotion could not replace consent. And when Anne finally stood beside the Queen beneath the revised trust's banner, the message was complete. The crown's inheritance would be protected not by unchecked power, but by a family willing to challenge, forgive, and vote together. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.